We are going to start this hearing. Representative O'Neill, if you'd lead us in the pledge. All right, if the representatives could introduce themselves, starting with you, Representative Twardzik.
Oh.
And we have a senator with us today. We're honored to have Senator Argo here as well with us. So,
Good afternoon. I am Tim Twardzik. I'm a representative serving Schuylkill County, and it's the 123rd District. It's great to be with everyone here.
David Rowe from the 85th Legislative District. That's all of Snyder and parts of Union, Juniata, and Mifflin counties.
Representative Alec Rinkavage, 119th Legislative District, that is Luzerne County right down the road.
Dave Orgel, 29th Senate District, Luzerne, Schuylkill, Carbon. Representative Watrow, thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Dane Watrow, representative of 116th District, right here in the greater Hazleton area, Hazel Township, and the northern part of Schuylkill County.
Representative Josh Kale, Beaver, Washington counties.
Mike Cabell, representing 117th District, right up the road, a couple feet.
Couple feet. Representative Tim O'Neill, I'm from Washington County.
Representative Jamie Barton, the 124th Legislative District. That's southern Schuylkill County and northern Berks. I'd like to thank Representative Watrow for putting this together today, and certainly Chairman Kale as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Watrow, thank you for having us here. If you'd like to give a brief opening statement, the floor is now yours.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I cannot thank everybody in attendance today, the committee, and foremost our testifiers, Nick Harrell and Mary Labert, for your sincere interest in this bill that is being ran. It's an important thing in today's economy. Just this past weekend, my wife Angela and I were out shopping, and you could just see the look in people's face when they have to put back meat or groceries to make ends meet. People don't have the money anymore, and it's a struggle. Nick Carroll, you and I had a conversation a short time ago, and I seen it in your face, in your eyes, the struggle that the good people here in the 116th District have, but clear across the state of Pennsylvania. So, Mr. Chairman, I cannot thank you enough for your time traveling all this way from your part of the district, so thank you.
Thank you, Representative Watrow. I always enjoy coming out to this part of the state because it actually, although it's on the opposite end of the state, it reminds me a lot of my home in southwestern Pennsylvania. It's a similar types of industries, similar type of history, similar geography even, and it's always a pleasure to come here. And by the way, I think you guys have the best pizza in the world in this area, so I enjoy that as well. Look, there are two separate visions that we're seeing develop in Harrisburg right now. And I think this bill in particular, as it relates to the tax cuts and that shows the policies that we are driving on the Republican side. And the two visions are, one vision is Harrisburg spends your money and gets to take more money and then spend it. And then the other vision is one that gives money back to the people. It gives money back to constituents so that they can choose wisely what to do with their own resources. And then that's what we would like to do. And the Senate passed this legislation not too long ago. Senator Argo is here, and I'm sure he could talk a little bit about how that process went in the Senate. But we also have a House bill in the House of Representatives that myself and Representative O'Neill introduced. And our thought is that you, the people of this Commonwealth, know how to spend their own money better than Harrisburg does. So that's the stuff we wanted to talk about here. And then today we have three testifiers joining us, and they will share insight into the Republicans' historic tax cut legislation and how these tax cuts could positively impact their households. So each testifier has between 3 and 5 minutes. Now, I've never gavelled anybody out for going longer than 5 minutes. So if you go a little bit longer, that's okay. But we really want to get to the point where we can ask questions so that we can hear from you and have some interaction after the testimony. So if you can keep it 3 to 5 minutes, that would be appreciated. The first testifier, we have Andrew Holman. Is he with us virtually? And then Nicarol Soto. Is that how you pronounce it? Nicarol Soto. Okay. And then we have the Honorable Mary Labert. Labert. Okay. I'm not great with names, as you can see. But we're going to start here with Andrew. Andrew, if you could, can you hear us?
Yep. Yes, sir.
Okay. The floor is yours, sir. 3 to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Chairman Kill, and thank you, members of the committee, for the opportunity to speak today. Before diving into the specifics of tax policy and the reforms outlined in Senate Bill 269 and House Bill 2388, I'd like to start with the larger vision. That is, the economic challenges Pennsylvania faces, the solutions to these challenges, and the overall importance of making Pennsylvania an economically competitive state. In short, our economy is stagnant due to burdensome regulation and an uncompetitive tax structure. As a result, our state's young, skilled, working-age adults are leaving to other states in search of lower cost of living, lower taxes, and better economic opportunity. If left unaddressed, this population exodus will lead to serious fiscal challenges. But other states have demonstrated that tax reform is the best way to jumpstart an economy and make a state an attractive place to live and work. Now, a little more on the stagnant economy. There is some good news, and that is that our official unemployment rate has been near record lows for months. However, the unemployment rate only counts those working and those actively looking for work. The labor force participation rate, however, is still below where it was in January of 2020, with roughly 21,000 adults still not participating in the workforce. Additionally, we've seen slow and stagnant job growth, an anemic 1% over the past 4+ years from February 2020 to April of 2024. This is more in line with high tax, high regulation states such as New York, New Jersey, and California. Meanwhile, low tax, low regulation states like Florida, Texas, and the Carolinas are seeing job growth that exceeds 7%. And finally, we're still dealing with the effects of inflation. Wages have increased, but costs have managed to increase faster. Looking at real weekly earnings since January of 2021, we've actually seen a 5.5% decrease. So what does all this mean for the state? And perhaps the biggest consequence of this is seen with outmigration. Unfortunately, our economic challenges are not new. In fact, because of the uncompetitive economy, we've seen domestic outmigration in 12 of the past 13 years. It's worth noting at the county level that Luzerne County is actually one of the few seeing population growth from domestic migration, attracting residents from high tax neighboring states, New York and New Jersey. But overall, we are losing population. We lost a congressional seat in 2020, and early projections for 2030 have us losing yet another seat. And we're seeing tens of thousands of residents leave Pennsylvania in favor of states like North Carolina, Florida, and Texas. And worse yet, this outmigration is concentrated in our younger working age adults. And this is a brain drain that is a serious threat to our fiscal and economic health. I've seen this firsthand, born and raised in Pennsylvania. Many friends I've gone to high school, college with, some who even came to the state for college, they're leaving frequently to North Carolina, Florida, and Texas. We actually did some polling on this a couple months ago and found that over half of Pennsylvanians under the age of 30 know somebody who has or have themselves considered leaving the state. And the most commonly cited reasons were lower cost of living, lower taxes, and better economic opportunity. There are some fiscal implications of this. According to the IFO, our dependency ratio, which measures the number of working age adults per senior, is projected to shift from 3.5 working age adults per senior to 2.5. And this means lower PIT collections, while expensive programs that primarily serve seniors are going to grow. In fact, the IFO projects a 5.9% average annual growth rate for the long-term care program, which far outpaces the projected general fund revenue growth of 2.7%. Now, how do we fix this? Census and IRS data shows that residents across the country are leaving high tax states in favor of low tax states. This plays out in Pennsylvania. We see our residents leaving for places like North Carolina, Florida, and Texas, while we're attracting residents from states like New York, New Jersey, and California. Tax burden, particularly income tax, is closely linked to economic growth and migration, and this is why the 8 states with no individual income tax are consistently among the fastest growing. As such, already in 2024, 14 states have actually lowered their individual income tax rate, and this includes red states like North Carolina, but also blue states like Connecticut. Now, Senate Bill 269 and House Bill 2388 propose reducing the income tax rate from 3.07% to 2.8% beginning in January of 2025. This would return the rate to where it was in 2003 before former Governor Rendell's tax hike. And under this proposal, we would levy the 10th lowest rate. And it's worth noting that we have not decreased our PIT rate since 1986. And reducing the PIT rate will also benefit small businesses, which actually pay the PIT rate rather than the corporate rate. The bills also propose eliminating the gross receipts tax on electricity. It shows up as a surcharge on bill, impacts homeowners, renters, consumers, and businesses alike. In the first year of implementation, we ran some numbers. Household earning the statewide median household income would save a combined $473 under this proposal. And in Luzerne County, we see an estimated savings of $447 per household. These tax cuts will have a large impact in the grand scheme of economic competitiveness and signal to individuals and companies that Pennsylvania is serious about improving its tax and business climate. In short, we are failing to compete with other states due to burdensome regulations and uncompetitive tax structure. Other more economically competitive states like Florida, Texas, and the Carolinas are taking our residents. Combined with an aging population, this outmigration will present serious fiscal challenges if left unaddressed. We have to reverse this trend by beginning to keep our people here and start attracting people from other states. And tax reform has proven to be the most effective way to do this. The reforms presented in Senate Bill 269 and House Bill 2388 will help make Pennsylvania an attractive place to live and work. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to any questions.
All right. Ms. Soto, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, dear Representative. Thank you so much for the opportunity this afternoon. My name is Nikero Soto, and I immigrated to the United States, to the city of Hazleton, Pennsylvania in 2004. I graduated from Hazleton Area High School in 2007, from McCann School of Business and Technology in 2010 as a paralegal, and from King's College in 2016 with a degree in literature and a minor in political science. At the age of 30 in 2017, I had my first child. At that time, life still felt like manageable. In 2018, I was hired at a local utility company with a decent salary. I am here today to discuss the rising cost of living since 2020, how it has impacted my ability to provide for my children. In 2017, I had my first child. As we were establishing a family, my fiance and I decided to buy a house to promote a healthy, stable life for our toddler. We wanted to provide him with a place where he could grow up with a sense of financial stability, healthy environment, and some freedom. A place where he would be able to run, jump, and make some noise without having to control his freedom as a toddler. Early during pandemic, my boyfriend was let go from work due to the situation, and he started taking care of our child. This decision was not hard to make because with my salary, I was able to support my family and even help my mother, who was also let go from her job due to the pandemic. My boyfriend started taking care of Ian, and we felt comfortable with this arrangement because we kept him at home, reducing the risk of exposing him to COVID-19. Back then, it was easy for me to pay household bills, including the mortgage, gas, electricity, water, sewer, and buy food for 2 weeks. I remember paying my automobile bill and insurance ahead of time all the time. All these utility bills were manageable. I had no problems with them. Before the pandemic and during the first 6 months of 2020, I could buy my baby weekly groceries, and this is the most, painful per se of my statement. Weekly groceries for less than $100, typically between $80 and $90 per week, just for his own consumption. At the end of 2020, I had my second child, a little girl. By the first quarter of 2021, I was already feeling the impact on my finances, not because of the increase in my family side, but most likely due to the increase in food prices and utility bills. Before the pandemic, I could buy groceries for 2 weeks for $200. Now, the same shopping list costs me about $300 bi-weekly. Additionally, all utility bills has gone double since 2020. That including UGI, PPL, and water, among others. The point that 2 paychecks per month are not enough to cover just the utility bills. As you know, household expenses are not limited to the utility bills. There are other miscellaneous expenses that need to be covered as well. These rising expenses have had a profound impact on my children. I had to cut back on extracurricular activities that they used to enjoy, such as sport and music lessons, because we simply can't afford them anymore. Additionally, the stress of financial insecurity affects our entire families and mental health. Due to the unbearable situation, my fiance is back into the labor force. However, now that we are both working, there are other challenges, such as babysitter for both of our children. According to my research in the area, finding an affordable babysitter that provides safety and at the same time has rates, they all have rates from $160 to $250 weekly per child. This is equal to $320 to $500 per week, or $1,280 to $2,000 per month, which is equal to an entire monthly paycheck going just to babysitter. This effectively puts us back into the same financial situation as before. There is no point of my fiance going to work. So if he goes to work or not, we back to zero because there is no income increase because everything would go to babysitter. According to recent studies, the cost of living has increased by over 10% annually since 2020, with significant hikes in housing, food, healthcare costs, and many other things. Many families in our community are experiencing similar struggles, making it clear that this is a widespread issue. In conclusion, the rising cost of living is placing an unbearable burden on families like mine. I urge you to consider measures that can help alleviate this financial pressure, like House Bill proposed, such as increased support for affordable housing, expanding access to affordable childcare, and implementing policies that address the root cause of inflation. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. Ms. LeBert.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Kale, members of the committee, Senator Dave Argel, Representative Dane Watrow, and fellow Pennsylvanians. My name is Mary LeBert, and I have been a resident of Schuylkill County, living in the town of McAdoo for over 75 years. I have served on the board of directors for the Pennsylvania State Association of Boroughs, United Charities, members of Prime Timers who have 100 members over the age of 55. I am beginning my 48th year as a member of council for the McAdoo Borough, advocating for the needs and well-being of the community I love. We have to start somewhere, and so today I am here to speak in support of the proposed legislation to eliminate the gross tax receipts, which currently imposes a 4.4% surcharge on all electricity bills. This tax impacts every household, and its elimination will bring much-needed relief to consumers by reducing our monthly electricity expenses. In Schuylkill County, the largest age group consists of seniors over the age of 65, accounting for 21% of the population. Many of us live on a fixed income where every dollar counts. When you know that your income won't increase, but your expenses might, it creates a significant amount of stress and worry. Stable and affordable utility bills are essential for maintaining a decent quality of life. The cost of electricity in Pennsylvania is on average 3% higher than the national average, and in Schuylkill County it is 5% higher. This places an even greater burden on our residents, especially seniors. Rising electricity costs make it increasingly difficult for many of us to manage our monthly expenses. Friends and neighbors have faced tough choices due to these rising electricity costs. One friend had to choose between paying for necessary medications and covering her electric bill. These are not decisions anyone should have to make, for eliminating the gross receipts tax can help prevent such difficult situations. For individuals like myself who live on a fixed income, it is crucial that our living expenses remain predictable and manageable. Reducing our electric bills will provide financial relief and peace of mind. In conclusion, eliminating the gross receipts tax will significantly benefit our community, particularly our seniors, by reducing electricity bills. I urge you to consider the positive impact this legislation will have on our residents and support its passage. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your service. 48 years on the council. Thank you.
She's just getting started.
Thankless work. All right. Representative Watrow.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Really don't have questions for you other than a few comments. Wow. Hearing your testimony, both Carol, Honorable Mary LaBert, and Andrew, really shed a lot of light on how this bill, this House Bill 2388, could really help Pennsylvanians. It's just that it's unfortunate we're at this time in our life that, Mrs. LaBert, you mentioned a friend of yours had to choose between food or medication. That should not be. We live in America, and we live in one of the best states in America here in Pennsylvania. So I'm really hopeful that we're going to see this bill get across the finish line and offer some relief to citizens here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And Carol, Mary, and Andrew, thank you so much for your testimony. We have a lot of members here today. They might have questions in our comments. I want to give them the opportunity as well, but sincerely, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you for your leadership on matters like this and many others. And we appreciate how you've taken a lead on a number of things. Senator Argel, thank you for having us here as well.
Absolutely.
The floor is yours.
As I think Representative Watrow or Representative Cabell could attest, it occurred to me during your testimony that Republicans and Democrats in the Hazleton area have a record of being able to work together much better than we often see in Harrisburg. But I think on this issue, Mr. Chairman, I think this could really prove to be the exception, because you'd mentioned the bill that was approved by the Senate on May 7th. It was a veto-proof majority of 36 to 14. I looked it up this morning when I was in the office. Every senator in northeastern Pennsylvania, Republican and Democrat, voted for this legislation. You have to go all the way to Pittsburgh or suburban Philadelphia to find a senator who voted against it. And so we don't often see that kind of a veto-proof, one-sided vote on a major piece of legislation. And so to my colleagues in the House, I'm not going to imagine for any moment it's easy to bring this issue to the floor, but if you can, there's no doubt in my mind it will pass. And so again, Dane, thanks for the invitation here, and thanks to everyone who participated.
I have no doubt that you're correct. If this bill runs on the floor, it'll pass with flying colors, maybe even veto-proof in the House of Representatives as well. Representative Barton.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you all for your testimony. It was very moving. I want to share with you a fact, and then I'll ask you a question as a follow-up. So 20 years ago, it was 2004. I'm not going to ask any of you how old you were, but I was around. Mary was around, and that's all I'll say. 2004, the Commonwealth State, and I wasn't a state rep. I'm a freshman. I came in with Dane and Alec and Representative Cabell as well. So in 2004, the budget for Pennsylvania Commonwealth was $21 billion. $21 billion. Now we can say, well, that was 20 years ago. It's a big difference. But let's adjust that for inflation. Is that fair? So if we say $21 billion, adjusted for inflation today is about $31 billion. I'm going to be pretty close on that math, okay? So $31 billion. The budget that the governor is suggesting is just south of $50 billion. I guess my question is, have we, this tax cut, in Senator Argyle, your comments are well taken. This is a layup. This is a no-brainer. This is an easy win, and thank you, Chairman Kale and Chairman O'Neill for bringing this to the forefront. But this is just one of many that could probably happen. I don't think we should stop here. And I guess my question is, do you think that we need to be continuing to spend? If we think about 20 years ago, and we adjust it for inflation, we adjust that budget for inflation, would we need to tax our people this much? And can we give this money back to taxpayers? Are there other opportunities? And if so, what would you do with that money?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry, I talked a lot. I apologize. I guess my question is, when we think about a budget, that if we compare 20 years ago the budget to today, the budget is close to $18 billion more than it was 20 years ago. And that's apples to apples. Apples to apples. This tax cut would do would be a significant tax cut. My comment is that we can do more, to the tune of $18 billion more. And I guess, do you feel that your tax dollars, would you benefit more paying taxes? Let me put it this way. Would you benefit more in paying taxes, or would you benefit more having money in your pocket?
Well, I think that the legislature, all of you are in Harrisburg to represent each of your constituents. And I think this kind of hearings are good because you're hearing at first hand the struggle from your constituents. And at this point, you will have to prioritize you will have to identify where the struggle are and then go from there and appropriate accordingly where the struggles are and what is priority for your constituents right now. So I don't know if that answered my question. Your question.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have to do more. It's easy to raise the budget and have, we have this much money, but the citizens aren't benefiting it. Everything is going up. Blue Cross and Blue Shield, the property taxes, senior citizens. When I started to say was, I went to this lady's home, knocked on the door, and she answered it with an Afghan pinned around her neck and a flashlight in her hand because she didn't want her electric bill to go up. She had to pay the electric bill and she needed medication. something has to be done, and we have to help these people. So you could raise all the money you want, but property taxes and that has to come down, and give our citizens a break. That's all there is to it. Senior citizens can't keep surviving on the cost of medication, and that we need help.
Mr. Chairman, may I? So I'm assuming, Mrs. Liebert, you're saying that this is a good start with this bill
Yes.
to offer some type of
It's
relief?
a first start, at least.
And I know, Ms. Soto, you mentioned about the sports and everything else, and I just feel like your testimony also says that this is a good start to offer some type of relief for our citizens.
Yeah, if I might, I don't think it's fair that I have to deprive my, my kids, to provide them with extracurricular activities and give them a better quality of life, because that's what I'm working for. But if the government is not helping me to, to raise and give back to society by investing give back to society, meaning like investing in my children, to give back to society, like make them good citizens, that maybe in 20 years they might be one of you, like good citizens that brings back to their community and provide, back to the community. I think that if I invest in my children and provide them with good education, values, moral values, and made them very skilled citizens, I think I'm investing in them. I'm making them good citizens. But I need help from the state, meaning government. The government have to make sure that that medium class, provide for their families. It's not fair that I have to deprive my son of giving them like a good, life. It's not fair. So I think that Pennsylvania needs your help, and I think, like you stated, this bill is a good start, and we need to go from there, and we need to prioritize what's good for the citizens, and you have to take it to Harrisburg and make it happen. Thank you.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'd like to take Representative Barton's comments just a step further. So 2018, when I was first elected into office, the very first budget, and I came in right at the beginning of the budget in June of 2018, very first budget that I worked on was just right around $34, $35 billion. So this year, as Representative Barton mentioned, we're considering a budget nearing $50 billion, somewhere around a 40% increase just since I've been the 6 years I've been in office. And one of the things that kind of struck me is when we consider that our spending at the state level has gone up that drastically just in a short 6 years, is, Ms. Soto, your testimony in that same time, half of that time has been since 2020, right? So, and we've spent nearly 40% more at the state, and your testimony basically says you're in the exact same financial position you were, if not potentially worse at this point. That's truly remarkable to me. And I first and foremost, thank you for your testimony. Thank you for sharing your story and your perspective with us. One of the things Mr. Holman's some of the materials he provided for us here that we have up here says that a family of four for Luzerne County through this proposal could save, his number is more exact than my estimate, but $447.70. I've even seen estimates that go up to $1,000 per year. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think for a second that $447 or $1,000 per year drastically changes your financial situation. But some some opponents to this proposal have scoffed at those numbers, and I actually think they're more significant than some people have let on. So I'm curious. Again, I don't think it's automatically going to completely change your financial situation if we pass this situation. But I am curious as to what an extra $1,000 a year might do for you and your family.
I would take that one. I still have a record of my monthly budget from back then. Like I stated on my statement, I was able to pay one with all my utilities and mortgage with one. I get paid bi-weekly, so I was able to cover most of my household bills and mortgage with one paycheck, and then my other paycheck would go into miscellaneous spends. So I think that anything would help, because Mrs. Lambert stated, $200 can make a difference between food and medicines. So I think it would be anything that can help. It would be great. Any help would turn around situations.
Yeah, and to be honest, that's what I thought you would say. I do think I would also agree with one of the comments that Representative Barton made, as well as Representative Watro, that, again, acknowledging that this doesn't automatically change the financial situation of everybody across the Commonwealth, but this is a good start. Mm-hmm. This is historic in the fact that you heard it. I think Mr. Holman mentioned that the income tax hasn't changed since 2008, I think, if I remember correctly what he said. This would be the largest reduction in state taxes ever. And the idea that we are willing to, or we want to take the step to ensure that you keep more of your money, quite honestly, in Harrisburg, just a few hours down the road, is a remarkable concept. It really is, because as you can see, just in the time that I've been in office, all we do in Harrisburg is continue to spend more and more and more. Mm-hmm. This is about changing the philosophy of how we go about our state budgeting. This is about changing the philosophy to ensure that you get to keep more of your money, as opposed to people in Harrisburg getting to decide where that goes across the Commonwealth. One last comment I'll make, and it's not specifically about Luzerne. I actually don't know the numbers for Luzerne, but I'll make it for Washington County, where I'm from, is for every dollar of tax revenue, and that's every type of taxes, whether it's income tax, whether it's corporate tax, whether it's sales tax, for every dollar of tax that a resident of Washington County sends to Harrisburg, we get about 70 cents on the dollar back of investment in various ways, whether that's roads or bridges or municipal, whatever it is. We get about 70 cents back on every dollar spent. Just right next to Washington is Allegheny County, where Pittsburgh is. They get about $1.50 back for every dollar they send to Harrisburg. One of the things we need to change with this mentality is to ensure that each county across the Commonwealth is getting a proportional amount back. That the reason why there's that discrepancy is because you have people in Harrisburg deciding where that money goes instead of people keeping it from their own paycheck. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for your testimony. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
May I make a comment?
Yes,
I
ma'am.
think the senior citizens of Pennsylvania would deeply appreciate an extra $1,000 a year, even if it would pay for their medicines, anything that would help them. They get Medicare and they say, oh, we're getting a raise. And by the time we get that raise, we have $1 increase, and that's it. People need to pay for their medicines, so help the senior citizens out too. They need it.
And Representative O'Neill, I do find it interesting. You mentioned that this is a historic tax cut and it's a revolutionary concept in Harrisburg that they give money back to the constituents that send their hard-earned taxpayer dollars to us. Yet when it goes up for a vote, it's a supermajority that ends up voting for it. It's just interesting how that works. Representative Rinkevich.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. As I'm sitting here, I'm reminiscing back on knocking doors and sitting in my office and hearing those stories from senior citizens, people like my parents, my peers. I'm a first-time home buyer, so I know where this money would go. And I want to ask a rather technical question to Andrew, because you spend, each one of us here, you spend 18 months on the campaign trail, knocking on doors, sweating your butt off, talking to voters, going everywhere you can for somebody to listen to you. You get to the building, you get underneath the 6-ton chandeliers, you say, man, I made it, and then you hear all the reasons why we can't do something in Harrisburg, whether it be property tax relief, whether it be ending the gross tax receipts. You spend all this effort, all this money that goes into elections. You get there just to hear what you cannot do. And so I want to ask a technical question to Andrew. Why is it this policy can be done now? Understanding the context of where we are as a state, where we're at with our budget. I mean, granted, politicians think they know everything, right? This is why we need good testifiers here today. But why is it this could be done now, and what are some of those implications that could urge our colleagues to finally run this bill for a vote to answer some of the testimony we heard today?
Well, yeah, I think it's important, and you saw this with the vote on the Senate bill, is there is a bipartisan consensus behind this stuff. Even the governor in his messaging, he's always talking about making Pennsylvania open for business. And I think, that this just demonstrates how urgent of a problem it is. And, looking at stuff like the dependency ratio, where we're losing population, the costs are going to increase, we really need to start reversing this trend, because really it can't wait. We need to start keeping young people here, attracting more young people, and the best way to do that is through tax reform. And there's a bipartisan consensus behind improving the business and tax climate.
Representative Rowe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Holman, I got another one for you here. Your testimony referred to the dependency ratio and how that's getting drastically reduced by 2030. Extrapolate that out for us in 2040 or 2050. What does a 1-to-1 ratio of working adult to senior mean, both for the tax burden of the working adult, but also the reliability of the social services that seniors depend on?
Well, yeah, I don't have the exact number. I can follow up with you. The IFO projected this out, but I think what it looks like is less working age adults means there's going to be less personal income tax collections, which essentially means that the rate is going to have to go up in order to pay for these programs. Now, like you mentioned, the flip side of this for the people who are dependent on these programs and need them to survive is when there's not enough money to fund them, that's going to be an issue. You're going to be looking at either cut services or, like I mentioned, you're going to have to increase the tax rate to help pay for these programs to prevent those service cuts. So it's really important that we take action now to kind of slow that trend or even reverse it to prevent getting to that 1-to-1 situation.
Are there any other states that you can kind of point to that have not made the turnaround in time, where you have seen just exponential increases to tax rates or tragic cuts to social services? Are there other states that we could look at as a warning?
Yeah, there's certainly some of that. I don't know of any states that have gotten to like a terrible point yet, but you look at Illinois, California, some of those high tax, high regulation states, they're in spots where they can't pay for their programs, and they already have high tax rates, and they're just continuously raising revenue or cut services, and they're just in a really, really bad fiscal situation right now.
And I think the combination of both of the types of testifiers we have here, we have the person looking at it from the policy perspective, but then also the personal perspective, correct? Where if we are continuing to look at tax increases and spending increases, we're continuing to chase people out of the state as more seniors move in, but working age people move out, we're going to approach that point where these services won't exist anymore, or we're going to continue to tax people to the point where more of them leave, and then we're going to rapidly approach this tragic tipping point. This policy committee just recently wrapped up a fantastic hearing series on benefits integrity, and the sad thing was 1.5 million Pennsylvanians, working, able-bodied Pennsylvanians, are currently enrolled in social programs that they should not be in. But meanwhile, we have 14,000 people in Pennsylvania that are awaiting these services. So the concern is that we have billions and billions in new dollars and new spending for new programs. You know, the governor talks about, oh, he's going to spend $3 billion. But case in point, we already have an enormous social net, and you guys still aren't getting the help you need. Seniors still can't afford heat. Seniors still can't afford their medication, despite billions and billions of new spending. So, I mean, I think your guys' testimony here today is inspiring to us to think that, hey, maybe rather than the governor's proposal of letting them decide where to spend all this money when it's not getting where it's supposed to be getting anyway, and just let you keep your money in the first place. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Twardzik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How about that? Let us keep our own money and decide what to do with it. I'm going to vote for you. But inflation is a disaster. I just read an article that food is up 21.5%, gas 54.8%, electricity 29%, car insurance up 51.7%. If anybody's going on vacation, your airline flight's going to cost almost 40% more. So it's going to be very difficult to make ends meet. And we want to try to keep more of our money here. That's why we're talking about these tax cuts. But Andrew, just back to you. Well, when you do tax cuts, is it true that you normally get increased revenue in a state? Because I know that worked when we did the federal tax cuts.
Yeah, essentially, you know, the effect of a tax cut is you lower the rate, and by that you broaden the base. So, you know, take for example these tax cuts. You cut the personal income tax rate, and then you know all of a sudden more people start coming from New York and New Jersey. Suddenly, there's more people to tax, and then your revenue will increase. Yeah.
Okay, and that's important to know because that might be some of the pushback we get, that if you're going to lower taxes, you'll lower revenue, but that is not the case, and we need to bring more people in. Our economic development folks have done a great job in increasing the opportunities to work, and so we're now finding that we're short on workers, which will then drive a fact that we're going to need more housing. So that's an important thing we want to do. We want to increase our housing, we want to increase the workforce, we want to increase our quality of life here. And that's what we need to do as a group. And I appreciate your testimony. It helps us understand what's important for senior citizens and for a growing family and everybody in between. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Heffley.
Thank you, Chairman Kale. It's nice to be able to speak about tax relief and not get gavelled down for a change. Generally in Harrisburg, when I mention tax relief, they gavel me down, but I'm not going to stop. You still got a gavel. So. But, you know, I read a recent report that 1 in 6 Pennsylvania households are behind on their utility bills. And you look at the inflation, which is much to do about really bad policy versus the fact that we don't have cheap energy. We have cheap energy here in the state of Pennsylvania, but it's bad policy that's just driving the cost up. Providing some relief back to you through that tax relief would help you to pay those utility bills. And putting those dollars in your pocket. It's always said that a rising tide raises all ships, right? So, and that works both ways, right? So if you get tax cuts, you invest in your home, you hire maybe somebody nearby to do a project at your house, and they're making more money, and that money stays locally in the community. You have money to maybe donate to your church or to a civic organization that stays in your community versus just going out to the hole in Harrisburg. And I always say, give Harrisburg $20 and we'll spend $60. But with that said, I think your testimony about how these, you know, financially how difficult it is for families, and I hear it every day when I'm out in my communities and the struggles that people have, and providing tax relief, whether it be through income tax relief, through gross receipts tax relief, or through, God, we all want it, property tax relief. That's something that goes directly back into the community and into your pocket. So really appreciate your testimony today to see how families are struggling. The other thing that's very alarming right now is I'm talking to a lot of young people that are starting to have children. I'm a grandfather, and I always like to mention that, and I would love to have a lot of grandkids at some point. But a lot of young families right now are struggling, and they don't know if they can afford a second or a third child. How sad is it that in our society, and that in the United States of America, young families are contemplating whether they can afford a child? We should be doing everything we can. And by giving tax breaks to families that are working and that want to have children, and letting them be able to afford the house that they live in and afford the utility bills, that's what government should be doing. So thank you for your testimony, and we'll continue to keep up the good fight in Harrisburg to get you that relief.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any other questions before I have a couple? Yep.
One more comment. The other day we were up in Rep. Renkevich's and had a great hearing about property taxes. And the Crestwood School District looked at the plan that's been proposed by the governor to try to end the unfair taxing and unfair funding of schools. Now, we've had this project. We've had hearings on it. Several of our local districts actually had sued the state because they weren't funded properly, yet we don't see any relief from it. The solution that they put out there still doesn't fix the discrepancies. Crestwood actually got penalized because they didn't raise taxes as a school district every year to the max, so they'll get 37% less money in the funding program. And that's just ridiculous. Again, they're being conservative. They've cut costs. Unfortunately, they cut art, they cut music, they cut teachers to try to keep from taxing seniors out of their homes, yet it doesn't seem to have an answer. And we've got to figure a way to fix that tax program. And one of the things that came out, we talked about how much money does a school district get from taxing a mill. So one mill tax is so disparate in different locations. Again, up in their district, it was about $227,000 came in if you increase taxes 1 mil. In Schuylkill County, we've got small districts that collect $87,000 for 1 mil, or $61,000. And how do you compare that when you go to a district that has a lot of real estate value and they're getting $575,000 for 1 mil? So the existing program we have, we can't keep, and that's taxing seniors out of their homes. I'm not sure what the answer would be, but we need to fix that, because no matter what we do, the solution that they have, spending $5-6 billion more, is not going to fix the problem. Our students are still going to suffer, and I was very happy that Alec had that good opportunity to spread that news. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anybody else? I'm going to ask a couple of quick questions here. First, I wanted to, because somebody mentioned the benefits integrity hearings that we had, and I'm just reflecting upon how Harrisburg operates as opposed to how you all told us today how you operate. Where in Harrisburg, there's money that's being spent that's completely unaccounted for. That people don't know where it's going. We don't even make sure that before someone gets a benefit, they live in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. There's all of these different things that are occurring, and we bring these individuals before committees and ask them detailed questions, and they don't have answers. They don't have answers as to where money's going that was appropriated. They don't understand how it got to this point. It's very frustrating. And then you hear from you ladies, and every cent, it seems, is appropriated. You know exactly where your resources are. You know exactly what you can and can't do, what your kids can and can't do. And it's just a stark contrast between what we see when we go to Harrisburg and we talk about a budget, and then when we talk to constituents and we talk to Pennsylvanians who are working through their budgetary issues on a daily basis. And it's one of the reasons why I think it's just much better policy for us to give money back to the people that are overseeing how to spend it directly, which is you. It's your money, and you know how to spend it better than anybody else does. And I think as much as that we can do to give it back to you, I think is good policy. Mr. Holman, I wanted to ask you, and it hasn't been brought up much today, the PIT tax cut. This will also have a significant benefit to small businesses, correct?
That is correct, yes. The small businesses pay the PIT rate rather than a corporate rate.
Yeah, could you explain that a little bit more? Because I think it's assumed that it's just a personal income tax, but how does that work as well with the small businesses and pass-throughs and the vast majority of entities that we have in the Commonwealth actually pay this tax and not corporate taxes?
Yeah, I believe there are, I want to say 7 different classes of income under the personal income tax, and certainly most small business revenue comes through that, and those entities will pay the income tax rather than the corporate net income tax. I'm not too familiar with the intricacies of the pass-throughs and that. I'm happy to follow up with you on that if needed.
Thank you. And when you reduce taxes on small businesses, that allows them to reinvest it, correct? So you should see some growth from these tax cuts as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be reinvested either through business expansions, which means more employment. They may offer better benefits to their employees, higher salaries to their employees. You definitely see the reinvestment with the tax cuts, especially for small businesses.
You had mentioned earlier in your testimony, and this is the last question I have. You'd mentioned earlier in your testimony states where people are moving to, and somewhere in here you actually have the graph. I think in particular you said North Carolina, Texas, Florida. I think those were the 3 that you had mentioned. What's the income tax rate there, the state income tax rate in those states? Do you know offhand?
Yeah, Texas has no state income tax. Florida has no state income tax, and I believe North Carolina's is at 4.5%, but that's been constantly decreasing since about 2013.
Okay. So people are moving to places where they're not paying as much in income taxes. And
yes, absolutely.
And the economies in those states are doing fairly well, very well.
Yeah, very well. I believe job growth in those 3 states exceeded 7% over the past 4 or so years. Meanwhile, here in Pennsylvania, we saw about 1%. So it's fair to say that the economies in those states are doing well.
So if we want to be competitive, like the governor says he claims he wants to be competitive, this is something that we should be pursuing. Is that your professional opinion?
Absolutely. Yep. The census data shows it. The IRS data shows it. People are consistently moving from high tax, high regulation states to lower tax, lower regulation states.
Thank you. Thank you all for your testimony today. It's truly appreciated. Thank you, Representative Watro, for having us here. If you'd like to make some final remarks, we can go from there.
Chairman, thank you so much. And colleagues, I cannot thank you enough for the showing that you came here in the best district in the state, 116th district. So thank you.
It was only a 5-minute drive.
But testifiers, I cannot thank the 3 of you enough. My heart hurts to hear the things you said for medication to your children with their sports activities, how we could really be helpful, not just to you, but to all Pennsylvanians. And I think that starts here. This isn't a political football. This is something to help people. This is a bill that both Democrats and Republicans could get behind. So let's not, make this a political mess. Let's just do the right thing and get it done in Harrisburg, and thank you very much for your time.
And I think Senator Argel made that point very clearly when he talked about how well this bill did in the Senate. And thank you for your leadership and the leadership coming out of the Senate to get this over to the House. It was a veto-proof majority. That means that there was many Republicans and Democrats that voted to pass this tax cut. And that's exciting. That's exciting because I think we need more legislators that are of the mindset that our constituents know what to do with their money better than Harrisburg does. And that mindset needs to be driven all the way through in the Senate and the House, and that's what we're trying to do here with these hearings. Thank you for sharing with us your testimony today, and this series on the historic tax cuts will continue tomorrow, Tuesday, June 18th in Montgomery County. Until then, this hearing is adjourned.